Emil Catlick here with FantasyNation.com. We have an old-timer pioneer of fantasy sports today who started in the business in the mid-1990s, and he's done just about everything in the business. Got an incredible plethora of things he's done, and so we're very excited to talk about all of them and very honored to introduce John Hansen. How you doing?
Emil, it's an honor to be with you as well. A couple of old dudes just chopping it up, talking about the fantasy sports industry.
You look young. You're looking great.
Well, I got this beard. This is a Corona beard. This is just a response to this virus. I'm actually a guy who's made fun of all the millennials walking around with beards looking like, a victorious Union soldier coming home from the Civil War. But, if you can't beat them, join them, I guess. And, this is my answer to coronavirus. As soon as we're allowed to go outside and stuff, I'll probably shave it. But maybe I'll just keep just the white here, just the white part.
Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good.
Thank you.
Tell me, in your youth, were sports important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a huge sports fan pretty much from day one. Grew up, as kids did back then. All you did was play. In the summer, you'd go out for 12 hours and play. I remember back then I used to play baseball season, we'd play baseball. Football season, we'd play football, and kids don't do that anymore. But, I didn't play a ton of organized sports in high school, actually, because my parents would not let me play high school football. I was a little injury prone. And, at the time, there were a lot of kids getting paralyzed. And I probably would have gotten paralyzed, honestly. I would make the acrobatic catch and then break my collarbone, for example. I think the frustration of not being able to play high school football that's been in play here over the last 25 years in some way, shape, or form. Plus, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, and I realized early that, we're never going to win a championship, of course. So let me win a fake one, and I think those are two big elements getting me into fantasy. But yeah, always been a big sports fan. Vikings fan from when I was probably, I tell this story. It's kind of funny. The first game in which I became a Vikings fan was literally the game in which the term Hail Mary was made by Roger Staubach in the divisional playoffs in 1976. So I believe I was 7 that year. And that's when I started the fandom.
And who caught that ball?
Drew Pearson.
Very good. You got that right. Yeah, that was an incredible game.
Paul Krause was a little late. Roger looked him off. Paul Krause, Hall of Famer. Roger looked him off. He was a little late getting over there, and that's how Drew Pearson made the play.
And he caught it on his hip. It actually hit in his hands, and I don't know if the other guy hit it too, and his hands separated, and the ball hit in between his hip and his hand, and then he just rotated into the end zone. Why would you and I remember something from 1976 like that?
Well, I know why I would. I don't know about you, but I know what I would because that's my team and all that. But real quick, in terms of the fantasy industry, it still to this day is surreal because, of course, the next year they lost in the Super Bowl with Franz Harkington to John Madden's Raiders. And then 30 years later, I did radio shows with Franz Harkington. And John Madden voluntarily voiced the promo for my show just because he kind of liked me, and then I ended up meeting him. So, man, fantasy sports has just been – I owe everything to fantasy sports.
Well, yeah, you've had a hell of a career. So let's start out. When was the moment that you found out about fantasy sport?
Yeah, so in 1987, I was actually a part owner of a pizzeria that I worked at in high school, and we had a guy who was a regular customer who would come in a lot, and he was actually my Babe Ruth baseball coach, and I believe he was 26 years old at the time, so he was kind of a young guy. So one day he comes walking into the pizzeria right before the season and said, "Hey man, we need another team for this fantasy football league, and I know you really know your sports and your NFL. You want to do this?" I'm like, "I don't know what this is, but if it's about the NFL, I'm in." And as soon as I heard the concept, I was like, wow, that's really awesome. So I went across the street. I bought a little football annual magazine just to read up on, the teams and everything like that. And went to the draft and ended up leading the league in points. Didn't win, It was one of those old Miller Lite scoring systems where you would get double points for like out of position touchdowns, and it was distance scoring. But we did head to head. The best record won through the no playoffs. But a couple of times I've lost, ended up tied for the whole season and lost on the tiebreaker, which is total points. One year I lost by 4 points for the whole season. So that was my first league. I was Mr. Hard Luck, but then I broke through and I just beat everyone's ass, and they literally disbanded the league because I just won too often.
That's my goal in life, is to have people drop a league or kick me out of a league because I beat them too much. I don't think it's happened yet for me. So
yeah, I started doing the website and started doing it kind of as a job, and everyone said, "Oh, this is not fair." I'm like, I mean, it's not like I'm getting access to like information that no one else has. I'm just, focusing on it more.
Exactly. So you worked for a trade magazine somewhere along your early parts of your career. Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I worked, I grew up in southern New Jersey, right outside of Atlantic City. So I worked at a gaming publishing company. So that's kind of how I got the idea of being in publishing, because I kind of was already. So yeah, and ironically, the worlds kind of overlapped several times, actually. For example, I wrote a column. The magazine was called Casino Player. I believe it's still around. And I wrote a column on internet gambling. I was actually kind of an expert on internet gambling in the 90s. And, I actually wrote columns in the 1997 about how, fantasy should be separated from gambling. There were a couple of bills. There was a guy, you remember John Kyle from Arizona?
Yeah.
You remember the Kyle bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was behind the scenes a little. Not many people know that, but I was actually trying to advocate for getting fantasy separated from gambling, because they really wanted to put the clamps down on gambling. I haven't done nearly as much as others in the industry, like a Peter Schenke or Charlie Wiegert, but I did my part there. But it was ironic in that the worlds kind of overlapped and clashed a little bit, with the sports books and things like that.
So tell us how you got into fantasy sports.
Well, like I said, what happened was I was a disc jockey at a little radio station because I wanted to be, kind of in broadcasting, and I was, coming at you, that kind of disc jockey guy. And we had a little building where this little TV station rented studio space from us, and there's a little over-the-air thing. But they tried to do local original programming. It was really bad. But what happened was the FCC passed this rule basically stating that if you're a cable operator, and it was called must carry, and it said if you're a cable operator and there are over-the-air channels within your range, you must carry them on your platform. So this little rinky-dink station with 17 viewers went all of a sudden into 2 million homes. So I started doing this little, Monday Night Football preview show with another guy, and that's where the whole guru thing started. And I started making predictions, and even in 1994, we were getting calls. People were interested in it, and that's when I had the idea, since I was working in publishing and I needed money and I wanted something career-wise. So let me start a little newsletter, and I can kind of show it on the TV show, and maybe I can get some extra cash for my advice and picks and all that. And it just pretty much took over from there. In 1996, I was actually contacted by ESPN. They contacted me. I mean, if you want to talk about lucky, they were like, "Hey, send over some stuff. Maybe we can use you." I'm like, "Who is this guy?" From the Starwave Corporation. It turns out that was Paul Allen's old company that ran ESPN's website at the time. And it was very lucky.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, and also I've read that you did TV, ESPN TV, radio, and website in your career, which you're the first guy to do that for ESPN, is what I recall. Is that correct?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've learned that if you don't promote yourself, no one else will. So, I do have that stuff all over the place, but technically it is true. I was the first person to write about fantasy football at ESPN.com. Greg Ambrosius actually wrote, him and I talked about it. He actually wrote fantasy before me by like a couple of months, but he was doing baseball. So I said, all right, you can be the baseball guy. And I'm going to, because I remember, when the column went up, I'm like, there's nothing else here. There's no other content, So I guess I said, I guess I'm the first one. And then I started doing ESPN radio, and I, had regular spots in the 90s. And then the very first segment on ESPN television about fantasy, I wrote. I didn't deliver it, but I did write it. And it was on the NFL Tonight show with Mark Malone, and I believe it was 1998. And I had a line there that I kind of always remembered. Remember that time Cordell Stewart, they showed him crying on the sideline. It was kind of like a big thing. And my line was that he was crying because he drafted himself in fantasy football because he was a big bust that year. Not very nice, but, I was a young jerk. What can I say?
That's a good line. I like that one. So you eventually started a website for your business?
Yeah. Right. So that turned it was a hard copy newsletter, and then it was a website. It was online in 1995, but it didn't go 100% online until I believe 98. 98 was a big year, if you recall. It was really the year in which the cable modems like really became prevalent, and it's like, okay, now we're moving, now we're flying on the interwebs. And I remember the popularity of fantasy really exploding in 98, and due in large part to, what I just said about the World Wide Web.
Yeah, take a look at this. I don't know if you can see it on your computer.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, that is so, oh God, that scratched my cornea. That thing looks so dated and just awful. That was me writing that at 29 years old, and just trying my best to promote the crap out of myself. And I used to always present it like it was like, oh, we and our staff and this and that. No, it was just me.
Here, check this out. At the bottom of that page, the Mad Dog returns.
Well, that was a different Mad Dog. That's not Christopher Mad Dog Russo.
Yeah,
that was actually
Mike
a friend of mine.
Mindish.
Yeah, that was actually a dude I went to high school with who was into fantasy, and he was pretty good with the rookies.
Oh, that's great. Notice at the bottom there, you got a promo there from a guy who won the ESPN Sports Zone Fantasy Football Championship of 40,000 teams.
Yeah,
that's a handful.
Well, there you go. That tells you everything you need to know. So it was 1997, and ESPN only had 40,000 teams.
Well, that's a lot of teams, but I don't know if they're free or not. Check this out, too. This is 99. It looks like you did baseball also.
I did. I've dabbled in it. I believe at that point right there, Scott Pianowski, who's still in the industry, I was actually the first one to hire him in, right around 96. He was big on baseball. Yeah, we tried it. It was okay. We even did a little NASCAR. But at the end of the day, I quickly realized, like, wow, this is a great idea in theory, but man, football just is, number one, it's so consuming year round almost. And number two, the other sports just weren't nearly as viable, business wise. So then I just went right to all football.
So tell us about Yahoo. You started writing for Yahoo?
Yeah, well, I did the ESPN, for about 7 years. And then what happened was they essentially, wanted to get their own people, which I understood. And I was an outside guy. I was kind of all in on the website. And Brandon Funston had at the same time left ESPN, and that was my guy at ESPN, my contact there. And, he just reached out to me for, content, things like that, supplying content. For a good number of years, I did those little star ratings on the Yahoo game, where each player had a star rating, and I would write a sentence or two, a commentary. It was a very tedious work, but yeah, from '03 through, 2010, 2011, maybe a little bit later, those star ratings I actually provided, but which was great because I could always actually it was longer than that. It was up until maybe 5 years ago now that I think about it, because
Wow.
I was able to use it as a joke a couple of times. Like, for example, one year I did a radio show with Fred McGriff, the crime dog, who was a friend of mine. I got him on the fantasy channel on Sirius XM, and we were talking about his league, and he had one player, I can't remember who it was, and he's like, "Oh, he's looking good this week." I was like, "Nah, Fred, go check Yahoo, man. They don't like him this week." I said, "Go check those star ratings," which of course I had full control over, right? So I updated his player. I said, "Give it up, crime dog. You're going down. You got no chance." He's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, man, that's how good I am." I said, "I can control everything." And then I told him exactly what it was, but that was fun. I can say that as the statute of limitations has passed, so I can say that. It was like 10 years ago.
Good. You're safe now. So tell us about the Fantasy Fix. You did a cable sports and the cable sports network.
Yeah, so I did the TV show for Comcast. It started out like they it's amazing. Like every little thing I've done, it's like it starts out small and it just ends up, much larger. And it's not me, I mean, I'm a part of that, but I mean, the growth of fantasy and the popularity is really where it's all about. So I went on there on a talk show to talk fantasy one year, and then the next year they're like, "Oh, you should do this talk show like every Thursday, and you could just break it down." I'm like, "Okay." And then that turned into a whole show that was on, all their other affiliates and like DC, Chicago, New York. It was on maybe 7 or 8 different markets, and that was right around '03 through I think '09. I also did the NFL Network right around that time too. Me and Adam Kaplan were on the very first day of the NFL Network from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, which is 10 miles from where I am right now, actually. And so yeah, that was wild. That was pretty exciting being on the very first broadcast day of the NFL Network.
Was Ron Jaworski on that first broadcast also, or was he later?
Actually, the year before, me and Adam, and you were on that show, as you know.
One time.
Me and Adam did NFL Fantasy Live, which is still on, obviously. But it was only on NFL.com. It was actually a web show. This is '02. And it was on DirecTV. They would slap it on there just randomly as well. Then the next year, it wasn't Jaws. So it was the year after you came on that show, and you were promoting your National Fantasy Football contest that blew up, shortly thereafter. The next year we went to NFL Network, and Jaws, we weren't working with Jaws then. It was like the show was called Playbook, which was around for a while. And we worked with Sterling Sharp and Solomon Wilcots. But Emil, that was a thrill because Sterling is one of my favorite players of all time. I mean, even to this day.
Yeah.
I was a huge Sterling Sharp guy, and it was such a shame to see his career end prematurely. He was unbelievable. But to get to work with him, was really cool.
And Jaws was a pretty cool dude. I really enjoyed him.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, hell, I living in the Philadelphia area, watched Jaws in the Super Bowl when I was 10 years old, watched the Eagles ascend under Dick Vermeil when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. And then, 30 years later, I ended up becoming friends with them and working with them. And again, all thanks to fantasy sports.
Yeah. I remember on that show, you would do this sidebar rant. I forget exactly. You just pick a topic and you just start ranting away. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, they called it Guru Cam, I think, and they would put like this wild cam on me. I think it actually started with I was a big Plaxico Burress guy that year, and he was off to a bad start, real bad, and it was like week 5, and I did this thing in the camera. I was like, "Plaxico, I'm begging, please. It's just me and you here, buddy. I need you to ball out here, man. You're making me look bad, please." And he scored like 2 touchdowns and like 150 yards. So we said, all right, well, I guess maybe this works. And we ended up doing that like every week, and it seemed like it worked more often than not.
Yeah, I liked it. It was very entertaining. So you started a magazine in '03?
Yep. Became a competitor of yours, I guess, which I thought was. I always said it was we're a website that has a magazine. Like there were magazines, and yeah, they had a website. We were a website that had a little magazine, and it was good. I thought it was great. We had the first player interview ever. I did Clinton Portis the year he won Rookie of the Year. But I got to tell you, the thing I think most proud of with that whole magazine was, it was good and all that. It was a lot of work. It was a great promotional item. But I back in '03 started really, and I was doing it before, tapping into the beat writers. So in that magazine, there was an article called 32 Beat Writers Answer 32 Questions. And I don't think anyone had really done that up until then, enlisted the help of these beat writers for information and things like that. So, yeah, that was cool. And, of course, that's obviously still very prevalent today. Mike Clay at ESPN has really picked up on that because he works there. And, he taps into those dudes all the time. And my number one guy, and I actually paid these guys a little bit too. I would say, look, I want to get you to be like my insider for this team. And I'll throw you some cash. I may not reach out to you more than once a year, twice a year, maybe 5. I don't know. I mean, when I need information, I'll reach out. And my number one guy for that, Adam Schefter, who was working for the Denver Post, covering the Broncos. So I do take credit in seeing the greatness of Adam Schefter almost 20 years ago.
That's a really good one. So in around '04, you were doing a radio show with Fox Sports?
Well, '04 is when NFL radio launched on Sirius XM, and me and Kaplan.
Oh, okay. Is that what that is?
Yeah. Me and Kaplan did the show, the first Sirius show on fantasy. Still the same name of the show, Sirius XM Fantasy Football. And '04, we were on the first day of NFL radio as well, that wow. Summer of '04. And that blew up, of course. Then they added a Tuesday night show for like waivers and things like that. We would get great player interviews too, like amazing, like Adrian Peterson, things like that, because it was NFL radio. That was awesome. And then that was essentially the impetus for the channel. Once the bosses saw the Friday night and the Tuesday night shows blow up and get way more callers, they were like, okay, we're going to launch an entire channel. And it's been now, this is the 10-year anniversary of that, as you know, Emil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. They started in '04 with the NFL, and 6 years later they did the fantasy, and obviously it's been incredible for them. And they packed the week with tons of shows.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's just a combination of right place, right time, being very ambitious, aggressive, and taking any and every opportunity that I could. I had to pass on several over the years. There's a lot of stories there, but I'm still trying to get cloned. Been on the phone with the people in Sweden for 20 years trying to get this technology down so I can be cloned, but so far no luck.
Didn't work out on that one. So you and Kaplan were on the League TV show on FX. Tell us about that.
So yeah, in 2009, I got a call at the office. We had like a little office and everything, and it was this guy Jeff Schaefer, who was a fan of the site and me, and he knew I had a magazine, and he said, look, I'm starting a TV show about a bunch of guys in a fantasy football league. I wrote for Seinfeld and things like that. I was like, oh wow, that's awesome. And he said, would it be okay if I used your magazine cover on the show? I'm like, okay. I was like, please do. That's awesome. Yeah, so one of the very first scenes of that show of all time is the character Kevin sitting on the cam reading my magazine, which, I mean, that's the ultimate honor. Yeah. I mean, if you're bringing reading material, Emil, to the throne, that's pretty good.
Top notch. You need to get a picture of that. That's a great one.
I do. Oh, no, I've got it. I've got it, yeah. Yeah, it's Maurice Jones-Drew on the cover.
You got a picture of on a one of the episodes of Mom. I don't know if you ever watched that show. It's a good show. There was the mom got arrested and she was in the in jail, and the cops leaning up against his, sitting in his chair leaning back, and he's got one of our magazines. He's reading one of our magazines much later than '03.
Oh yeah, well that's the Nick Bakay effect
Nick
for
Bakay,
sure.
Yeah, I love Nick.
That's
Bakay.
awesome.
A great guy.
Of course.
So in 2013, you were inaugurated into the Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I guess they had no choice, I guess, but to put me in there. I guess it's weird. I don't really deal real well with that kind of stuff, believe it or not. Some people may think I'm a freaking egomaniac and all that, but it's, like I said, if you don't promote yourself, no one else will. I learned that. So I do promote myself and all that. But yeah, that was, it was very nice of them because it's not like I'm really that engaged or involved in that organization, actually. Just been too damn busy with 4 kids and all that. So that was nice. And, the only problem is I could talk to you. I could talk behind a camera or a microphone to a billion people. Not real good in big rooms with crowds. So I don't know if you were there or not, but for this speech, they said, oh, it'll be like 6 o'clock. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to have a couple beers, take the edge off. And then it was like, I didn't go on till like 3 hours later. I had like 14 beers. So, it was a little rambling there. If I'm ever asked to do anything like that ever again, in fact, I was, since I set my timer on my phone to get me the hell out of there,
Well, A, I was there. And B, I did recognize that you were a little bit tipsy. But it was great. Yeah. It was really fun to listen to it. And you said a couple of things just a minute ago that I thought were kind of striking, because I remember I'm the vice president of the Writers Association since day one in '04 when we started it. And we tried very hard to make sure people got the opportunity to be considered into the Hall of Fame of the Writers. And of course, you've done some great things many years before 2013. And we would go to you and say, hey, we'd really like you to, you've got to put a bio in and you've got to put a letter of recommendation. And you would use words like F this and F that and awards are bullshit. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, so, yeah, I do feel like in the industry, it's just everyone hooking up their buddies, and I was not a huge fan of that. Yeah, so that's right. Yeah. No, I wasn't angry. I was just like, basically, I was like, because they would send me things like, you need to fill this out to be considered in this Hall of Fame. And I was like, I mean, no offense, but I mean, do you want me in or not? So yeah, I guess I didn't. I guess I blew you guys off for a couple of years.
That's
right?
Okay. Well, there's many awards out there, many organizations, and the Writers Association, they work very hard. They got a team of this huge team, and if somebody's nominated, they have a separate board, and if you know that person or work with that, but if you work with that person, you have to step off and they bring somebody else in. They're very careful. It's a 2-phase process. And, they wanted a bio and a letter of recommendation that you never wrote, by the way. So do you know who wrote your bio and your letter of recommendation?
No, I don't. Mike Beacom, I believe, did he was involved in that. I know Andy Behrens, I believe, as well. Was it you?
It was me.
Oh, thank you. Well, now I feel bad, but yeah, okay. I know. I mean, it's just like, again, those things are a little awkward for me. And I guess my point at the time was like, I mean, if you want me in, just put me in, I guess. But I absolutely very much appreciate what you did and what anyone else did, because I guess I was inducted into this Hall of Fame kicking and screaming, essentially. So,
I'm making a little fun with it. It's fine. I understood where you're coming from. Not to get into a lot of bullshit, but at the time when we created the Riders Association, there was a other association that didn't like us being around.
Right.
And so certain people we thought were onerous, including yourself, but you weren't involved much in that organization. Those people didn't want to give it credibility. They wanted to kill it. So they were negative to it and didn't want to fill those forms out or didn't want to whatever. But over a period of time, it's an important organization, and it really was run and is still run very professionally. And all the writing awards that we have on top of Hall of Fame are edited by journalists or professors that are in the journalism departments at colleges, et cetera. So with no names on the writing of, the written, articles. So it's very, well done. But anyway, I
will say this too. As I mentioned, I do have 4 children. So I've been raising kids now, Emil. I'm in year number 28 of raising children, which is basically as long as I've been in this industry, but give or take a couple of years. I never had a partner for my venture. And I always really desired like a broadcasting type career. And at the end of the day, there's nothing left for me to do anything like be involved in that organization. But, as I've grown older, I have been trying my best actually to pay it forward and help out younger people. And I have been able to do a lot of that. That's what this new website is about in part too, because, it's going to be around long after I'm gone. And it's almost like I like to say, like, maybe it's a little bit of a gift to the industry, because I think it's going to be a great site for a long, long time, well after I'm out. So I am trying to pay it forward, Emil, for the kids, for the youngsters. Like that.
So tell us more about what your plans are for Fantasy Points.
Well, I sold the other website in 2015, in part because, again, just too much, unmanageable, with 17 different job titles, trying to do all the media. I couldn't really turn them down, and it was just really, really, really hard. But I didn't think I'd be back. My plan was to say, all right, well, I'm going to sell the website. That's that. And just do media. But a lot of the guys who work for me, I guess I was a really good boss. They just loved working for me and really wanted me to stay around. And, then I really thought about it. I'm like, wow, I do have this platform. I do have this base of knowledge. I've learned so many lessons. It would be dumb to not do something else. So that's, why I decided to do it. But what I did, Emil, was I made all these guys partners. There's 5 of them.
Wow.
So, last website I had 0 partners, no support, no help. Now I have 5. And in addition to, one of the guys is not a content guy whatsoever. He's just a great guy, Ben Kukanis. He's got a master's in English. So that's why I originally hired him to be like an editor and a proofreader, but he's done everything, business, graphics, you name it. But the other guys are all content guys. And as you know, fantasy analysis and the like has become way more sophisticated than, back in the day. Ironically, I end up getting the same answers to the test as all these analytics guys, but I don't break it down like they do.
Yeah.
So these guys are going to do the heavy lifting when it comes to the analysis. I'm involved very much day to day. I do the rankings and the projections. We kind of hash it out. I write a couple signature type articles, but it's these guys. It's their baby. Between the 5 of them, they own a higher percentage of the company than I do. And that's the plan. So I'm going to do this for a number of years, and then going to call it a career. And this website will be around for decades, because the average age of these guys is like 31. So they've got a long way to go.
It sounds exciting. Who came up with the name Fantasy Points?
Joe Dolan found it and thought of it as a viable, we really kicked around a lot. It's not easy coming up with a URL in our domain. Dolan technically came up with it, and then we kind of sat on it and marinated on it. And it's a little weird, right? Because it's like, it's such a prevalent term, but at the end of the day, it's got like dual meanings too. Like we make points about fantasy, and it really feels good. It feels like it's been around forever. A lot of people have told me they're surprised it's not a brand already, or wasn't. But yeah, at the end of the day, what are we looking for here? Fantasy points. Where do we get them? Fantasypoints.com. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's a good name. I like the name, and it's unique. And like you said, it has some dual meanings. So, and it's relatively short, about 13 letters. So it's a really good name. That should work quite well. So tell me any more. I ran out of questions, but if there's anything you want to talk about that pops into your head.
Oh, who knows? I have literally forgotten things, that I've been able to do. It's been insane, so many different stories. I could probably do a 5-hour podcast. There's just so many things. I will throw one thing out to you. I believe I did the first fantasy football podcast in 1996. Or if there was another one, it was no more than one or two of them. And it's ironic because in that other world I was in, the gaming company, I met this guy out in Vegas at some conference in the 90s, was telling him what I was doing. And he said, my brother works for this real small company in Dallas where they're doing like content, audio content, and things like that. So that's how I got hooked up with this. There's no production. They would call me on a Friday night and on the phone and be like, 3, 2, 1, go. And I'd talk for like an hour, previewing the week. And then that ended up being what I believe to be the first fantasy podcast or one of the 1 to 2 first audio content. But the company, the owner of that company, well, the company was called AudioNet. Then they changed themselves to broadcast.com. And then Mark Cuban sold that company to Yahoo and made quite a bit of money. So that's a little story that no one really knows about, only me. But it's an example of one of those things. It's like, man, I've been around so damn long and I've been so busy. Like I've literally forgotten things, that I've done. And of course, DirecTV. I always knew as a DirecTV customer, I just had this feeling. And I told my wife this in 1998. I said, you know what? Someday I'm going to be doing fantasy analysis on DirecTV because they have these Sunday ticket. Their customers are obviously, they're either, they're diehard fans, but a lot of fantasy people, let's be honest. And I said, man, this is so perfect. It took 16 years, but starting in 2014, they launched the channel Fantasy Zone, which is like a red zone. And luckily I got the gig. So we just wrapped up year 6.
Wow.
And looking forward to year 7 of that. And that's an all-day broadcast. I actually had to do it in L.A. This past year after doing it in New York for 5 years. So that was a real thrill to kind of have the vision and then it actually happened. Of course, this year, I may be doing it right from where I'm at right now, if things go, which would be insane to do national radio and TV from this room right here in my house.
Yeah. So you had to fly to LA every week?
Yeah. But last year was actually a good year because last year I didn't do a website.
Okay.
So it was kind of like a year off. I still did my own projections. I did the Sirius XM radio show every morning, 7 to 9 Eastern. But that was a good year last year.
Wow.
Because because I had no obligations other than the website. So, there were days in the summer, I'm living near the beach and I'm like, oh, it's 9 a.m. I'm off rest of the day. That was good. But, you can't do the radio and you can't do interviews and you can't write unless you're all in, so I still did work,
Mm-hmm.
so that's why it's always been easy for me to do all these media jobs because I'm already all in, so I was saying, I'm going to do the media jobs. I might as well just be all in. So my wife calls me all or nothing boy. I'm either all in or I'm out,
That's good.
So there will be a time where I'm just going to be like Kaiser Soze in the fantasy industry. I'll just, and then he was gone.
Good movie. DirecTV, the Fantasy Zone. So you sat there for 7 hours and talked fantasy and reviewed the plays. That's
not always on camera, but yeah, I mean, the broadcast day was, 1 Eastern through the end of the late games, usually 7:30 Eastern. So, mix it up. We would do halftime highlights. At the end of the show, we'd do like waiver wire picks and, we'd do a little DFS and all that. I mean, really just the most fun I've ever had in the fantasy industry. A lot of celebrities coming in and out. One year we had a bunch of players coming in and out. So it's been great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I lost my train of thought. There was something.
That's okay. I'm talking like way too much.
The Tropicana, 1998. Lenz and Sarah did the fantasy convention at the Tropicana in Las Vegas. Did you go to that?
I did not go to that one. I missed that.
Yeah. Okay.
I know Kaplan was there. I don't know why I didn't go, but I did not go.
Maybe you don't like Kaplan, I guess.
Nah, well, there's always a love-hate relationship there with Mr. Adam Kaplan, but no,
he's a character.
Kidding.
He's a character. He owes me like 7 dinners because every time we meet somewhere at one of those, he goes, "Hey, let's go to dinner." I said, "All right." We go to dinner, and he's like, "There's the check over there, and there's Kaplan over here." It's like, are you ever going to buy a dinner? No, he never bought it.
Well,
he's still around.
He owes you 17. He owes me 170. There's no doubt about it. But, I was going to bring up, and there's so many great stories, but were you the next year at the convention in Minnesota at the Mall of America?
I missed that, unfortunately. Yeah, I didn't go to that. Tell us about it.
Well, it was great. And, fantasy is big in Minnesota because, like I said at the top, everyone knows in Minnesota, like, guys, you're not winning a Super Bowl. You're a Vikings fan. You better win your own. So, plus it's cold as hell out there. So they're into fantasy. But I'll never forget it. At the bar watching football preseason with a bunch of people in the industry. Bob may have even been there, Bob Harris.
Uh-huh.
I know Joe Bryant, I believe, was there. And my sleeper quarterback of the year, I loved him. Trent Green. And we all watched the Rodney Harrison hit and the subsequent ACL injury and press conferences later that night with Dick Vermeil talking about how they're going to rally around Kurt Warner. And just crazy. Just because I love Trent Green. I was all in on that offense. And what a buzzkill. But you know what? I guess it all worked out. Even Trent Green himself made a couple of Pro Bowls after that for KC.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he finally recovered and had a pretty decent career. That's a great story. Well, thank you so much. If I could talk all day, I don't want to keep you forever with your new project, but you're definitely a true pioneer of fantasy sports, and I'm so glad we could get you on here and get you that award. And it's been fun working with you all these years. We really never worked closely together, but we knew about each other, and it's been fun the whole time. It's been decades, that's for sure. But congratulations.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, congratulations to you for sticking in the industry for as long as you have. You got me beat, right? I mean, you started
31st season,
before
1990.
Oh, there you go. No, you got me by 5 years then.
Yeah.
I mean, so congratulations right back at you. And now I know who I can thank for the Hall of Fame plaque I have right over there.
Oh, you won the Hall of Fame, but I just made sure you were in the process.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate all the other people who I guess went to bat for me, and anybody who's ever supported me. I've been very open about that. Hey, really appreciate it, and I wouldn't be here without people following me and giving a rat's ass what I have to say.
Well, thank you so much. We will talk soon, and congratulations again.
Thank you. Congrats back at you. Take care, Emil.